Hello all you beautiful people, Jules here, and I've been thinking long and hard about Captain Marvel. Not only did the film contain tons of interesting ideas and helped obviously to tie Marvel into the Avengers storyline, but it answered a lot of questions. Now, before I begin, I just want to say, look at the title and then look at this video. There are going to be a lot of spoilers for Captain Marvel, so you have been warned, you brave, brave Star Travelers. So, the issue of Nick Fury's eye, how the Avengers got their names, and why Ronan is so obsessed with the Infinity Stones all were made clear. Yet that's not to say that everything was crystal, as the film did leave a few big questions up in the air. For a start, while Nick Fury was told using the pager was strictly only for emergencies, that's not enough to explain why he didn't class a world invasion and the potential destruction of the planet that happened prior as emergencies. And then there's the issue of the missing Skrull. When Talos' Skrulls come to Earth and immediately embed themselves, there are 4 survivors. One becomes the old lady on the bus, one becomes the S.H.I.E.L.D. director, and one becomes Agent Coulson temporarily. The 4th's hidden identity is unclear, so the old lady is either Talos' science officer or the mysterious 4th character. By the end of the movie, Talos has escaped. The Coulson Skrull is dead thanks to the car crash with Nick Fury, and the science officer has been killed. So where's the 4th? Is the old lady still out there somewhere? It can't just be a plot hole. Talos' whole drive is to preserve the safety of his people, whether that's by violent acts against the Kree to defend themselves or making sure that they are safely embedded on other worlds. As his reaction to the death of the impostor proved, every one of his people is precious to him. The idea that he would simply abandon one of his own without a second thought is therefore inconceivable. There has to have been a reason. Captain Marvel's big twist on the Secret Invasion story has made most fans who know the comics suspect that we won't be getting to see that story at all in Marvel's Phase 4. I'm speaking, of course, about the Secret Invasion. Sure, we might get to see Skrulls again in Captain Marvel 2, because there are some loose ends like Ronan, the search for the other Skrulls, the destruction of the Kree by the Nova Corps, and the reason that Captain Marvel really stays away, but the idea of Skrulls as nefarious imposters on Earth now just makes no sense. But something of that story could persist. That missing Skrull could have been left by Talos consciously on Earth. What we definitely know is that there's a Skrull left on Earth. What isn't clear at the moment is why this might be the case. If Talos wants to reunite all of his people, why would he be so careless? Well, actually, Talos' plan possibly has 2 strands. It's not just about reunification, it's about finding a new home. The Skrull home planet Skrullos was destroyed by the Kree as part of their bloody war, and the Skrull were therefore scattered across the galaxy as they sought refuge from the murderous Kree who intended to exterminate them. They were driven underground in fear of this and had no opportunity to settle anywhere. Some hid on distant worlds, some roamed the universe like Talos as a military unit, and some were hidden by Mar-Vell/Dr. Lawson. As long as they were still being hunted and had little hope, they couldn't exactly go looking for a home in the local estate agents, could they? That all changes with the alliance between Captain Marvel and Talos. Not only does it allow Talos to find his family and the other survivors, but even more importantly, it equips the Skrulls with a godlike champion to protect them. They effectively turned the Kree's most valuable weapon against them, just as they previously turned one of their most important scientists against them in Mar-Vell, and disprove the idea that the Kree are an invulnerable enemy. In a short space of time, Marvel defeats what little resistance the Kree offers to her, and then terrifies the accusers so much that they turn on their heels and run away. I mean, sure, Ronan does offer a parting shot that he'll be back, but he won't really do anything meaningful. We know that his future includes an even bigger defeat at the hands of the Nova Corps, or at least a symbolic defeat for everything that he represents in the shape of the peace treaty between his people and Xandar. That treaty renders him redundant. He was bred for war, and the idea of peace after centuries of conflict absolutely disgusts him. And importantly, by the time that happens, he's turned his attention away from his vengeance on Captain Marvel. Why mention that? Well, because it's an important shift in the status of the Skrulls. They go from being the singular concern for the accusers to being inconsequential by 2014. That is an incredible shift in less than 2 decades, and it's all down to Captain Marvel being their pocket messiah. Marvel represents hope for the Skrull people, and she represents a chance for home. With the tide in the relentless pursuit of the Kree turned, well, not completely arrested of course because the Kree remain active and will recoup like a wounded animal, but as it stands, they can start to look for a new home. At the same time though, Talos still needs to search the universe for his scattered people, but he's doing so with one eye on the, and if you'll excuse the obvious Avengers pun, endgame. So therefore, it kind of makes sense that he would leave one of his most trusted men to scope out Earth as a possible sanctuary in the long term. Could that be what the missing Skrull is doing on Earth, testing the waters for when Talos has completed his mission and united his people? Earth might seem like a strange place for anyone to settle, but it's not at all unprecedented. Even with S.H.I.E.L.D. and the Avengers initiative inspired into existence by alien invasions, Earth is a good enough option for resettlement that Thor initially chooses it for the site of New Asgard at the very end of Thor Ragnarok. Just as he did in the comics, the God of Thunder chooses Earth presumably because of his personal ties to the planet. Even without a link to Jane Foster anymore, Thor is drawn to Midgard in the MCU and sees it as a reasonable place to build his home. And to be honest, why wouldn't he? Despite their complaints about collateral damage, Earth's people have quite taken to exceptional individuals like Thor, Spider-Man, Iron Man, and even Hulk, where in other planets they might ordinarily be classed as threats. We're clearly just open-minded people apparently. And consider this, in the 1970s, Ego chooses humanity to be one of the races he impregnates to try and create his offspring. Not because they would accept a half-celestial, but because he obviously sees some quality in them worthy of bearing his seed. He even falls in love with one who knows he's an alien and loves him back. Again, open mindfulness. Now, Talos can't possibly know this because the Avengers don't come to Earth until well after he leaves his man behind, and he has no contact with Ego or Meredith Quill. But what he does know is everything that a high-ranking S.H.I.E.L.D. director does, because he assumes the identity of one. He might have only had access to his most recent memories, but more importantly, Talos had access to his highest level security and is a genius-level scientist. Therefore, why wouldn't he access S.H.I.E.L.D.'s database to better know his enemy? In there, he'd find evidence of the Inhumans and S.H.I.E.L.D.'s general approach to different races. Yes, they're an organization hell-bent on protection, but their agenda to protect includes species other than humans. That sort of openness would surely appeal to the Skrulls looking for a home. Add to that fact that the Kree have an open hatred of Earth, it's a shithole is what they delightfully express about it. Therefore, why wouldn't the Skrulls choose somewhere they know that the Kree wouldn't like to go much? And now you have two big reasons as to why the Skrulls would look to investigate Earth. And as further precedent, in the 2016 story Occupy Avengers, Hawkeye encounters a whole community of Skrulls hidden in Iowa, who are being hunted by other villainous Skrulls. Again, they chose Earth as a viable sanctuary. It might be a toll to the Kree, but there are repeated examples of other races choosing Earth to settle. The MCU's Skrulls doing so would not be unprecedented at all, and leaving someone behind to work that out would make a fair bit of sense. The question now, though, is who that Skrull might be. It'd have to be somebody in a strong position, able to monitor Kree attacks and other key concerns, and someone who could perhaps help shape Earth to be more receptive to them settling there in the future. So how about Nick Fury? I mean, considering the agenda suggested there, Fury might just be the perfect candidate. The reason why a Skrull would choose to take Nick Fury's place is fairly obvious. He's in an incredibly privileged position, has huge resources available to him, and his part in the Avengers initiative could help shape the way that Earth perceives aliens and superheroes, so therefore there is actually no better candidate. What we need to know now, though, is whether there's evidence of him perhaps not being who he seems, and Captain Marvel does establish two key details that could suggest that very thing. Well, three, if you consider his general demeanor. The Nick Fury we meet in Iron Man and then properly in the Avengers is absolutely nothing like the one we've seen throughout Captain Marvel. The younger version is affectionate, full of humor, and isn't really considered threatening at all. That doesn't sound like the Fury we know, who is going to be the granddaddy of being a badass in the Avengers, who defied the deadliest assassin in history in the Winter Soldier, and who has no issue shooting a child in the neck with a dart gun just because he's in the way. It also doesn't appear to match the idea of Fury as the most ruthless man Alexander Pierce had ever met. That assessment is wildly different from the guy that we get to see holding up Goose the Flurkin in the climax of Captain Marvel. And yes, the passage of time does change people, but wasn't this the perfect opportunity to show him changing? If this wasn't what did it, what did? More specifically, there's a sequence in Captain Marvel in which the Vers ask Fury to tell her something only the real Fury would know. He tells her that he cannot eat toast that's been cut diagonally. A throwaway detail it might seem at first, but in Avengers Age of Ultron, Fury actually eats a sandwich he himself has sliced into triangles. Now we know, it's not toast, and this does seem pretty weird, but why would he have one rule for toast and one rule for bread? Now that would just be silly. On top of that, there's a pointed moment in Captain Marvel where Fury reveals that nobody calls him anything but Fury. It's how he determines that Talos has stolen the identity of his boss after he unknowingly calls him Nicholas. That's key to remember because in the post-credits scene for Avengers Infinity War, as Fury and Maria Hill drive through New York tracking the multiple bogies over Wakanda, Hill shouts his name twice as they're about to crash. Only she doesn't shout Fury, she shouts Nick twice, and he doesn't react. Wouldn't someone who establishes that nobody calls him anything but Fury have an issue with someone, no less his subordinate to boot, calling him by his first name? I mean, his mother calls him Fury, according to him. Could this be the subtlest hint that Fury is not who he seems? It certainly all seems to fit, but then again, Skrulls, well, it could be anyone. Right. And there we go, something to think on with the new Captain Marvel film. I hope you enjoyed it, but please let me know down below what you thought about this theory, because I'd love to hear your thoughts and expand the discourse, because at the end of the day, it is so fun to be passionate about projects and films that we love. So yeah, as always, I've been Jules. You can go follow me at RetroJ over on Twitter. I hope that you're well and treating yourself as best as you possibly can. And remember, you are awesome. Never forget that. I'll speak to you soon. Bye!